Okay. What we're doing is we've opened up the practice exercise for payroll registers located on your Moodle site. And we're on the very first page, so make sure you're there. If you're opening this outside of class, make sure that you're familiar with the various tabs at the bottom of Excel because they include different pages. So it's not just one page, but different sheets down here. The first thing I want you to do for each page as you're completing these is to look at the rates and limits at the top. So look at this page. For Social Security, what is it saying? 6.2%, right? And the limit? 106.8, which is the actual limit now, truly. How about for SUTA? 5.4%. And the limit? 10,000. And for FUTA? 0.8%. And the limit? So every pay period on this page, we're going to refer to these limits. Now, those limits may change for the next page, so pay close attention to not only rates, but to limits. So let's look at pay period 1. There are no prior earnings. This makes this one easy. So the current earnings are shown in this column. Molly made 4, Phil 3,400, and Alicia 1,700. So what you're going to do is this portion. You're going to determine how much of their current earnings is taxable for each one of these taxes. So for FUTA, how much of the 4,000 for Molly is taxable? 4,000. All of it. How about for SUTA? All of it. 4,000. And for Social Security or OESDI? All of it. And Medicare? One thing about Medicare we know is there's no limit, so the current payroll is always all taxable. So again, you're not putting the amount of the tax, you're putting the amount of the current earnings that are taxable. Okay, how about for Phil?
So basically that first box is going to say 4,000?
Which first box?
For the FUTA?
No, not for FUTA, but for Medicare there's no limit. So that's always going to show the current earnings. So under here, under Medicare, Holly, up here?
Yeah, well that's what I'm saying. The 4,000 is, it's the
Current earnings for Medicare only, but not for FUTA. FUTA could change depending on if they've met the limit or not. This one happens to be the same, but you'll see it change as we go to payroll, pay period to pay period. So what about for Phil? 3,400. Keep going. All the way across?
yeah.
Right. Why? He hasn't reached any limits for any of these taxes. So the full amount of his current earnings is taxable. And for Alicia, well, obviously if the first two had full earnings taxable, she does too because she made the least. So put 1,700 in each one. Now, unfortunately, you don't have formulas in yours like I do. So the next part, you're taking the total for all of the taxable earnings for all of your employees. You're just going to add them up. And because they're all the same as the current earnings, we know this total will be the same, 9,100. No. No, employee. So 9,100 is for all employees. The limits are per employee, not for all. So you have to look at the taxable amounts per employee.
But it says right there that the FUTA, the limit on the FUTA is 7,000.
Per employee. Per employee, not for all employees. So 9,100 is for all the employees. Okay?
Okay.
And then what you're going to do is once you get the total of taxable wages for each employee under each tax, you're going to multiply it by the tax rate that follows. And that will give you the amount of taxes that have to be deposited. So for FUTA, what did you get? $72.80. Make sure you round up like you do everything else. Anything 5 and above goes to the next cents. And you always record them in dollars and cents because this is an actual money amount. So do this for each one, and let's see if you come up with the same things that I do. It'll give you good practice doing those decimals too, multiplying by decimals.
So you would take that total amount, the 9,100, and multiply it by 0.008.
Correct. Correct. 9,100 times 0.008, which is the same as 0.8%. 9,100 times 0.054, 9,100 times 0.062, and 9,100 times 0.0145. Okay? Let's pause. Let's look at pay period 2 for those of you who are done with 1. Now, first of all, if there are prior earnings or cumulative earnings or year-to-date earnings, you must look at that when determining whether limits have been reached. So for Molly, she had prior earnings of $4,000. So the first thing you're going to do is to see if they've exceeded the limit by adding both the prior and the current together. Now, 4,000 and 4,000 is 8,000. Has the limit been exceeded? Yes. So therefore, how much of the current is taxable for FUTA? 3,000. So we're going to put in 3,000. 3,000 of the 4,000 current earnings is taxable for FUTA because you only have to pay on it up to 7,000. Now, what's the limit for SUTA? 10,000. Have they reached the limit? No. Then you automatically put the full current earnings in. Make sense? How about for Social Security? I think we're a little off from that one. We got a long way to go. So the full current earnings is taxable for Social Security, or OESDI, same name. And Medicare, what I say before, there is no limit. Therefore, the current earnings are always taxable. So we're going to put 4,000 in here. Now for Phil, for FUTA, 3,400 and 3,400 doesn't equal 7, so we know that if it's less than the cap or the limit, the full amount is taxable. And for FUTA, same thing, because the limit is even higher. In Social Security, we're not even close, so 3,400. And also for Medicare, because there's no limit, so the full amount of current earnings is taxable. So keep going. Alicia, she made the least. She's not close to any limits, so the full amount of her current earnings is taxable for everything. And once you get them all put in for their taxable earnings, total up each column, and then multiply it times the tax rate to get the amount of taxes. And see if you come out with the same figures that I do. Don't just copy them down. Check to see that you can get them to come out the same. me pause for a minute. Okay. For pay period 3, as you can see, current earnings are a bit inflated. Must be a good year or a good bonus or a good something. Anyway, so the first thing we're going to look at is, did the prior earnings exceed the limit for these taxes? Because if they've already exceeded it with prior earnings, what are we going to put here? 0. So for FUTA, what's the limit? 7,000. And the prior earnings were 8. So we know what we need to put here is 0. Because we already were over the limit. Yes? You can put a line through it. You can put a 0, whatever. Just indicate something. Don't just leave it blank. Now, for SUTA, the cap is 10. So how much of this 100,000 is taxable for SUTA? 2, because we've already paid on prior earnings of 8, so there's only 2 more to meet the 10,000 cap. So only 2,000 of the 100,000 of current earnings is taxable for SUTA. Now, here's the tough one. Social Security. What's your cap? 106.8. Are we exceeding that by combining prior with current? Yes. That automatically tells us that not all of the current earnings is taxable. No. So how do we determine how much of the 100,000 is taxable? Okay. This is a quick, easy way to do it. There are different ways to do it and get at the same amount, but I'm going to tell you a quick and easy way. First of all, you ask yourself 2 questions. First of all, if prior earnings exceed your limit, then you know you've already met them. It's going to be 0. However, if prior earnings do not, you add prior earnings to current. If they then exceed the limit, this is what you do. You simply subtract what? You simply subtract the prior earnings from your limit, and that will be the amount that is taxable for the current. So, based on that, if we take 8,000 from 106.8, what do you get? 8,000 from 106.8. Good. 98,800. So for this current pay period, out of 100,000, only 98,800 is taxable for Social Security. Now let's check that. If 98,800 is taxable for Social Security, and we've already paid prior earnings of 8,000, what are those two added together? 98,800 plus 8,000. 106,800. Is that our limit? That tells you you've done it correctly. So you can check yourself by adding the taxable amount to the prior, and if you've reached just your limit, you've done it correctly.
Could you repeat the last part?
Yes. If, when you add prior earnings to current, it exceeds your limit for that specific tax, all you have to do is subtract prior earnings from the limit, and that will tell you the amount of the current taxable wages. So, for Medicare, what's the taxable wages? All of it. 100,000. Now, for Phil, how much for FUTA? 200, good. Because Prior earnings were $6,800. The cap is $7,000. So he needs to pay it on $200 of the $100,000 that he earned. How about for Suda? Good, $3,200. Again, he's already paid on 68. The cap is $10,000, so he only has to pay it on $3,200. And for Social Security, all of it, because both of them added together equal the limit. Good. And Medicare? All of it. Always all of it, because there's no limit. And Alicia's easy because why? Her current and prior do not exceed any limits. Therefore, how much of this current earnings is taxable for FUTA? Yep. So we're going to put in $1,500 or all of it, all the way across. She must not have got the memo. She must have been absent for a while. Once you total up each column for the employees' taxable wages, go ahead and multiply it times the rates, and that should give you your total employer taxes.